Before we get to the video, please like, comment, subscribe, share it to that uncle who's a communist. And if he isn't, he will be.
Don't forget to follow us on Patreon at patreon.com/revolutionary rhetoric. And Revolutionary Rhetoric is an affiliate of the Anti-Capitalist Podcast Network.
All right, let's get to the video. All right,
well, let's get to it. Let's do a quick little bio. Michael Parenti, born in 1933. The homeboy is 90 years old. I actually thought he was dead. When we decided to do this, I didn't think he was alive. I didn't know. But no, he's still alive. He's 90 years old. He was born he grew up in New York City to an Italian-American family. He went to City College in New York for his bachelor's degree. He went to Brown University for his master's, and he went to Yale for his PhD. He was. I just wrote down some interesting facts here. He was arrested at a Vietnam protest. So he was like an academic, like a tenured professor teaching in a bunch of colleges in the kind of New England area. I think in Chicago in particular was where his or they call it like University of Illinois. I believe one of those colleges. And he was a professor and a pretty accomplished professor. He went to an anti-Vietnam protest in 1970, and he was arrested with like some really trumped up charges of like assaulting an officer. There was like a parade of witnesses at his trial. Everyone that was there said he absolutely did not do this. Like, you know, it was very obvious. There was just tons of people that like vouched for him and like that came to his trial or whatever and just said like, no, this, like, you know, I saw him. He did not strike the officer or whatever.
Yeah.
But the judge found him guilty anyway because he was a Marxist professor. You know, he was like a dirty commie protesting Vietnam. And so he was found guilty of like a bunch of felonies, actually. And so he fought it for like 2 years. He tried to he appealed it or whatever, but he eventually lost. He spent 2 years on probation, had to pay a bunch of fines. But what that gave was the kind of more conservative board of directors and like board of like regents or whatever on all of the colleges that he had like tenured professors at, that allowed them to fire him. And they had wanted to fire him because he was like a Marxist professor, but he had tenure and you can't, you know what I mean? Like his position was stable until this gave them cause to axe him. And it actually blacklisted him from teaching anywhere again. So he never taught again. He was just never able to teach again because of that reputation that he had like a felony and like was this Marxist like rabble rouser that was going around punching cops or whatever that followed him. And I guess everywhere he tried to work, he could just not, he never was able to get a new contract teaching. And so that was actually kind of a big deal because that was his whole thing, was he was a professor. And so he actually turned to writing full time because he couldn't get a job as a teacher. So that's when he started writing books. Yeah. And this was in the early to mid-70s.
Don't have to be, well, it's also, I guess in a way you could, spin it in a positive aspect, because like if you are banned from teaching, it's like, okay, well, I have nothing holding me back to actually say what I need to say, because the worst they can do is not hire me. And so if they're not going to hire me, I'm going to be completely open with my Marxism. I'm going to be completely open and transparent with, the Soviet Union, about all the type of Red Scare bullshit that things that were going on during that time. And which is good because it can give people an aspect of and a certain perspective of like what Marxism is, without having to have like some sort of like cushioned pillow, a muffled pillow in front of his mouth to not say everything that he needs to say.
Yeah, I mean, it can allow him to just like say like exactly what you said, just like kind of like be really honest and be really frank and just not hold back, you know. And I mean, the guy just has been prolific. I mean, I'm looking at some of his bibliography. Starting in, I mean, he wrote a couple things in the he wrote one thing in 69, one thing in 71, but starting in 75, he kind of like took off and he wrote quite a bit. And we read, so for those of you kind of just tuning in, we read the book Blackshirts and Reds: Rational Fascism and the Overthrow of Communism. And this book was written in 1997, I want to say. So it's relatively new in terms of like his tenure or his like career. But that does make it 28 years old, give or take. So like it's old, but I'm older than this book, so it's not like it's not a Marxist, like we're not reading Lenin or Engels here.
Yeah.
So but anyway, I don't know, let me just, I guess, start with just overall impressions. So I will say this is the first time I read this book. I know this is kind of like what everyone says is like the seminal modern Marxist classic. Like if you're going to read Marxist theory or like any kind of political book, it should be this one. I think I disagree with that. I think State and Revolution is probably like, if you're going to read one book it should be State and Revolution, but I digress. That's if you're reading this one, it's a really, if you do choose this as the book you read, it's great. Like we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, it's only like 160 pages. It's free on Audible. You can get it. It's about 5 hours or so on Audible. It's free, so there's really no reason to not kind of read this book. What did you think? What was your overall impression?
I think it was genuinely a great book because it kind of gives you like a perspective and like an inside eye inside the Soviet Union that you're not really supposed to see. Because and I know a lot of like leftists in general, when they're writing, they praise the Soviet Union, blah, 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 blah. But it's also nice to hear criticisms of why it didn't work out. And you don't get that from many leftist authors. They go on to praise Marxism, but when it's put into action, there are certain things that like we need to reevaluate, and what best way to do that than like take a look of history, what happened, and what can be improved. And he kind of goes into that direction of us like, hey, like these things that happen in Russia, it might have been from their culture, it might have been from this or that, but obviously these things happen because when you alienate, say, the people in the USSR from like technological goods from Japan, they get a little jealous that they can't have that. And so like, how do you combat them? That's real. That is a real thing that happened, and and then they see like, oh, we can only have these things that we produce. How can you combat that without without giving up on your Marxist ideology or turning toward like a capitalist spin like Deng eventually pushed China? How can you hold on to like this pure idealistic communism without giving into the capitalist markets? And it's a really good and eye-opening to actually be able to read about the mishaps of the USSR.
The entire chapter 5, or excuse me, the entire chapter 4 is called Communism in Wonderland, and it kind of it very much details all of the bureaucratic kind of inefficiencies of Soviet-style communism. And I think that's, I think he did that for two reasons. One is that there's no better, it's a very tried and true debate tactic, is if you're like presenting an argument or any kind of argumentative, it's an argumentative flair of, if you're presenting this argument and you have your thesis and you have, here's my point, and then say, well, here's a counterpoint that you could say, so you say it before they can.
Exactly.
And then you kind of cut them off at the knees.
You think of what they're going to say and you say it yourself, and then you already correct it. And
then but I like that, like, he is very open, like, yes, Soviet style communism, or like there are problems within the Soviet Union, because that's kind of the main, the biggest example of kind of communism in the last 7 years, China and Cuba and, a handful of others notwithstanding. But he talks about like there's these sections in the book called rewarding inefficiency, nobody minding the store, wanting it all is what he was talking about, of like that luxury good aspect. But like what he's talking about essentially, to summarize that chapter, is like, there is a certain human element to like that greed of like, if you're not being rewarded for that, like for going above and beyond, it's very easy to take a bribe. It's very easy to like. And
what's crazy is like when I talk to my grandfather or my parents, they say the way they were explaining Yugoslavia, like some certain parts that were not that great, like minor corruption within systems. It was exactly as he was explaining it.
Which
book.
Is like, I've seen
seen
that and heard that,
And I don't know if that's just Slavic culture, and I mean,
no, I think that's just human culture. I think that's just human nature. Is like,
but there's like something like, for example, like when I think about Balkan people, there's a certain thing like,
not lazy.
No, it's not lazy. It's kind of like it's almost like human culture to share. It's like, hey, I'm this guy in this department. My fucking house, my roof is leaking. I don't know how to fix a roof. You do that for me, and like maybe you don't have to pay as many taxes.
Yeah, and they kind of mentioned of like, you get paid the same whether you like farm a truckload of whatever or a barrel load. So why farm a truckload? Why break your back?
He was talking about that during the Vietnam portion, and he was basically saying communist like farmers were basically like, well, we would get that portion of money from the government no matter how much we were producing. Yeah. And so why work extra hard to produce twice as much when we're just going to get the same money back?
Yeah. He also mentioned, I think, the same thing as like hitting quotas in like Soviet factories of like, when you're producing whatever you're producing, it's like, you don't want to produce that much because then your quota will rise. So it's like, you know, the
Exactly.
more you work, the less you're rewarded, or the more you're expected, the harder you're expected to work. So it's like, why, and for no extra pay. So why? But I would also, and he counters
Mhm.
that, I would counter that, and he counters that, is that's exactly the same system we have in capitalism, but
Yes.
just without the healthcare or the guaranteed job. So it's like, I'd rather have that than this.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, he lists, but and he
Exactly.
makes that point in the next chapter, is like, all that being said, that's no different than our current system of capitalism.
Yeah.
But the only difference is, under our current system of capitalism, there's no safety net for if you lose your job. You're in, under a Soviet style communism, you're guaranteed just another job, which
Yes.
caused inefficiency because you really didn't. It didn't matter if you got quote unquote
Yeah. If you
fired.
got fired, they're like, I'll just get
They'll
another
they'll
job.
give me another
And
job.
so there's things like that. Perspective is like,
Yeah.
yes, we need to guarantee jobs, right?
Yeah.
If somebody doesn't have a job, but at the same time, things can't go unpunished.
Yeah.
Like, how do we now, if somebody gets fired because he's blatantly racist, and you know our Constitution guarantees that person a job, how do we punish that person to not do that again? And so that's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
How do we improve on certain human nature, or just like on a materialistic basis? How do we improve on a situation like that?
Yeah.
Because we need people to work, but we
I
can't.
have the perfect like one-to-one analogy for this, of like, and this is 100% true. This is anecdotal, but I don't think it's super anecdotal. I think this is like true of all teachers. To kind of bring this to another real world example of teaching in America under capitalism is this exact parable. It's this same system. And what I mean by that is, it's that essay that I wrote where my main thesis was like, teaching is a job where no one checks in on you. It's kind of like the shopping cart theory, right? There is like, at least for me teaching ninth grade history, no one minds the store. No one checks in on what I'm doing. I could put my feet up and just play videos, play movies all class period, and I would get paid the same whether or not I designed, like I spent the night working after hours designing and implementing like engaging and like interesting lessons that the kids are like, you know, exploring and doing all this stuff. Whether I kick my feet up and watch a movie or do like all of this extra, like making really engaging lesson plans, I get paid the same. So like, you would think behoove me, and logic would tell you that I would just kick my feet up and watch movies, but I don't. I work very hard to design and implement engaging lesson plans. No one is making me do that. No one is watching to see if I am doing that. No one cares whether or not I do it. Generally, that's kind of the state of American public education, with some caveats and with some exceptions here and there. But by and large, that's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
And I strive for the best, because well, for one thing, there's a couple reasons for that. I think one is because this is a second career for me. I worked 10 years in a corporate like marketing kind of position, and I fucking hated it. And I went to teaching because I wanted to be a teacher. So like, I chose this career because I love it and I want to do it well.
Yeah.
And so I think the lesson there is, how do you
Reward.
how do you reward that? Or let's not reward that, because I'm not getting paid any more for it. But how do you find people that
reward
fit
is not
those?
always financial.
But yeah, but
Reward is
there
not
is an
always
emotional and like you know, there's the mental, and I love my job, and that is the reward, I guess.
Here's an idea.
But my point is, how do you find people? How do you find more of me to be teachers, and you know, less of the feet up movie guys, and get those out of teaching? Likewise, to this farming is like, how do you find guys that want to deliver the truckload of food?
I don't think. Well, listen, there's always things like janitors. People have to do dirty jobs. Nobody wants to do that.
Yeah.
Right. There's things that feel really good, almost altruistic. Like, you know, you're in medicine, you want to improve medicine. You're a teacher, you want to do better as a teacher, to have kids do better and you know, become a better person. But there's many jobs don't have that instinctive, like, I want to mow this grass better than somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, so these things have to be done. But what you can do, instead of like absolute finance, you know, you get a bonus, or you get a bonus, because that you start separating. You know,
that's a weird slippery slope that doesn't actually solve the problem.
What you can do is you can give them discounts. You can be like, okay, instead of having to put a 5% down on your first house, or you could put 3%. We're gonna give you that because you do such a good job.
Yeah,
we see you as a future.
That's one possible solution. Yeah, I mean, there's different things you could do, and so like, I think to get back to the book is like, the Soviets kind of like didn't figure that out fast enough or intentional enough. And it was also the first, like, I'm giving the benefit of the doubt, is like, hopefully under, God willing, an American style communism, like, that would be addressed and like researched and say, this is the problem we're seeing. There's a certain level of like apathy or like lack of I don't know, vigor or whatever, of like working hard how do we reward that? I think that would need to be addressed, right? Like the problems he explains.
Social credit points.
Yeah, social credit points. Oh, you mean like a credit score?
Yeah,
Yeah.
social credit score.
Yeah. So I don't know. That would have to be addressed, but I just wanted to call that out. That yeah, he's very much like open to self criticism and like self crit. I think that's important. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like I don't like the idea of a social credit score, but it also kind of makes sense. Kind of,
I
a
mean,
little bit.
Yeah, I mean we have a social credit score in America.
I know, but it's a real credit. Yeah, I know, the actual credit score.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about like a social credit score, it's just like how well you do at the job. You do better at the job and like do better results, you might just get better, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know
like
if I
it
necessarily
also,
like that, but
I like kind of the aspect of that, but like also it's negative if something happens or like you fuck up at work and then now you can't fucking get a loan or
Yeah.
your dog gets taken away or some shit.
I'm sure smarter people than us have like thought about this. We don't need to be the ones to solve Soviet style communism, but it is interesting to think about. And
I would love to solve a Soviet style communism.
Put us in charge, guys. Whoever leads
we'll figure it out. We'll be very open.
Yeah,
with the entire.
We need to find
function.
the next Lenin, Stalin, and Trotsky, and then have them put us in charge of like social planning. Whoever the next communist revolutionary is. Hit us up, revolutionaryrhetoric@gmail.com.
There you go. So, but getting back to the book in general, I think as it is a great book, I haven't read any other books, but I've had fellow family members read another book of his, and I want to kind of bring this perspective into how would I explain this? Not every leftist scholar is going to be 100% correct about everything.
Yeah.
And I've come across from this a few times now where, for example, personally, as many people probably know, I am Bosnian. I was born during a siege in Sarajevo. My family went through a lot. My people went through a lot. And recently, reading this book, I also found out that he was a big fan of Slobodan Milosevic, which does not take lightly to me. And it's not the only person. Noam Chomsky. And I've realized in leftist spheres, I kind of want to turn this into talking a little bit, and we'll go back to Parenti.
Sure. Yeah, whatever.
That people are kind of looking, they're not looking deeper and with more context than just praising any quote unquote socialist republic. For example, Yugoslavia was a socialist republic. It wasn't a pure Marxist-Leninist republic, but it was a trialed socialist state. But after the war in 92, 93, 94, 95, when that shit broke up, that wasn't a socialist country anymore. That was a whole different thing. But people would still go on about and praise Slobodan Milosevic, who became the first president of that newly found country, which was the Federal Republic, the Federal Jesus Christ, because the Social Federation Republics of Yugoslavia, and this is the Federal Republics of Yugoslavia. So they dropped the socialism. But when NATO bombed in the late 90s, when NATO bombed Belgrade, they hated NATO for it, and they praised Serbia. I don't like NATO, but you have to understand is with context, the person that they are bombing is also not great. He is not a good man. Look up who he actually is. He was a big fan of ethnic cleansing of Muslim people because he is a nationalist. He is a backing of the group called Chetniks, who are a fascist militia group. And they want to cleanse anybody that is not Serbian out of those lands, anybody that is Muslim, any Roma. And like they are not, this guy and the group that they're involved in are not good people. And so when somebody like that is getting praised by a socialist philosopher like this for being a quote unquote Stalinist or a good communist, it's not a good look because the guy wasn't actually a communist. He wasn't a Marxist. He was an opportunist. So whenever there was an opportunity to come into play, and he might have not even been a racist. He might have didn't give a fuck, but he was an opportunist at the end of the day.
What's his name? The guy?
Slobodan Milosevic. Slobodan. But this guy funded all the Serb proxy units in Bosnia, and those people conducted a literal genocide. Like a quarter of my family's dead. You know, my uncle doesn't have an arm. And so a lot PTSD. I mean, yeah, it's rough. And it sucks because I was loving this book and I still like the book, right? But like I said, a family member of mine read another one of his books because I was talking about him, and in his forward of the book, he had Slobodan Milosevic write about uniting the people and Marxism, but this guy was literally conducting genocide against my people, and also was very racially discriminatory against Kosovars. And you might be saying, "Oh, that's because the capitalism. They're getting capitalistically funded by the West, NATO, blah blah blah, to break apart Yugoslavia." I agree. Those not Kosovar people in general, but the U.S. and the West was trying to break up Yugoslavia because you can't have a socialist state and have it work, and then give that idea to the West that you can have socialism that works. Any type of socialism, right? That's why we invaded all those countries. That's why we invaded Vietnam, Korea, right? What they did was they financially broke us apart in Yugoslavia. The IMF, they basically convinced us of getting IMF loans and opening that whole spot up. But anyways, it's not about that. It's like, if this person is, and the people from Kosovo, Albanians, this predates capitalism.
Yeah.
Right. These people hate Serbians. Serbians hate them. Serbians hate Muslims. And I'm not saying Serbians as the people, but like certain extremist groups, and sometimes those extremist groups get a handle on the actual government, and they conduct what their ideology is in the name of those people, in the name of Serbian people and Muslims. And there's a lot of Muslims that did war crimes too. They should be put in jail. Same thing with Croatians. They were literally fascist puppets. But that does not mean you should now go and slaughter those people and then get praise for it from Marxists for being a Marxist, except you're not a Marxist. You're a nationalist extremist.
Right.
And a genocide. It's like we can't be free Palestine and then like ignore something that happened 25 years ago because it was under the name of Yugoslavia. That's all I'm saying. It's like
no, I think that's fair. And I think first addressing and like wrestling with those contradictions even within the left, I think is important. I think we talked about this just before we started recording. You brought all this to my attention because this was all news to me. I am notoriously ignorant on like the Yugoslavian history, and kind of everything Kanan just said was all new to me. And I just was trying to Google right now quickly while you were speaking, like trying to find some rationale. Has Parenti like kind of turned around on Milo? What? How do you pronounce it?
Slobodan. Slobodan means freedom.
Okay, what was just his last name?
Milosevic.
Milosevic.
Yeah.
I was seeing if Parenti had kind of like maybe like said something about Milosevic in the days since he wrote that, because he wrote To Kill a Nation in 2001 or 2000.
Yeah, and that's that's 2000 or 2001.
To Kill a Nation, the attack on Yugoslavia was 2001. So that's when he was in the Hague, or he was undergoing Hague trials, or 2004 or whatever. But my point is I was looking just now to see if Parenti has said anything since then, and maybe kind of like walk back some of that of like I was wrong or whatever. All I can find, and he hasn't as far as I can tell, but I mean I Googled for 30 seconds. But what I did find was like people asking like, why is Parenti such like a genocide apologist when it comes to that guy? And it's the internet, so all I could really find was like anarchist subreddit saying tanky's gonna tank and stuff like that, which isn't isn't helpful.
Yeah.
Because like anarchists just hate tankies regardless, and like that's just saying he's a tanky isn't actually like helpful to the conversation.
Yeah.
So
I'm a fucking tanky.
I'm a tanky.
Yeah.
We're literal tankies here. But like the way they use tanky as pejorative isn't how we internally claim tanky. Those are different things. Like they claim tanky as just like, it doesn't matter. It's like an insult to just anybody left of Noam Chomsky. They're like, "Oh, you're a tanky," and they don't want to hear it. But regardless, I digress. I think calling out those hypocrisies and internal contradictions among the left is an important thing. I think like like there's problems with every. I think that's dialectical materialism. We've had this exact same conversation regarding Stalin before. Of like, there are inherent contradictions with what he did that don't align with the Marxist like ideology. Yeah, and we have to like account for that. And he
also talks about in his book that Stalin did some fucked up shit. Yeah, but you can't blame socialism because Stalin, moved 1 million Ukrainians from Ukraine into like Kazakhstan.
Yeah, but you also can't. In addition to not blaming socialism, you also can't just say Stalin evil, move on. Like Stalin also did a lot of good things, and like under his leadership a lot of people flourished, and like a lot of the life expectancy was raised and the quality of life was raised.
Same thing with
and like,
in China, with
yeah,
like
under
Mao
Mao, like
Zedong
like
even under Deng. For example, the Three Gorges Dam.
yeah.
They had to evacuate. What was it, like 500,000?
Yeah,
1 million
and that was
people?
like that was like a huge clusterfuck, and that wasn't like an intentional like murder. It was just like mistakes are made, and we
shit
don't
like that,
apologize.
yeah.
We don't apologize for them, but we recognize that like people are fallible and make mistakes, and you can take the good with the bad and move on. And there's
But
context.
there's also context. He didn't move 1 million people because like get the fuck out of here. He's like, no, it was like we need to make this so 10 million people get electricity. Here's some money. Go buy another house somewhere. You don't have a choice.
And again, just to like, and not to be like a whataboutist, but like eminent domain in America.
It's a real thing.
It's like America does that same thing and has done that same thing. The Trail of Tears, these forced marches, like America has done all of the same and worse, but you don't treat Andrew Jackson the same way you treat Stalin.
Put him on the fucking dollar bill.
Yeah. So like,
right?
So let's all settle down with the Stalin hate. We're tankies. We're going to defend some Stalin.
But it's like the same thing. He's like, wow, that was 150 years ago, Okay,
no, so Stalin was 70 years ago.
100 years ago.
Yeah, or I guess now, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
like
so
literally, they're in the fucking revolution. He was there too.
So like,
20,
so what
30s.
difference does it make? It's all dead men. So like, I don't parse degrees of dead generations. It's all.
But no, it's because the Red Scare. It's because it's
it's because 70 years.
It's
70 years of anti-communist propaganda.
Well,
the Second World War II ended. Red Scare propaganda, McCarthy
any
era.
fucking video I was watching a video earlier today on like weird military tactics, right? And somehow Lenin was brought up during the
Really?
Romanov. So it's like weird military tactics that surprisingly worked, right? And there's one like they're throwing a Japanese during World War II. A Japanese sub comes up to a British ship, and they didn't even realize it. They look down. There's a Japanese people sleeping on a submarine, and they look up at each other like, oh, and they didn't know what to do. So they start throwing potatoes, and they thought it was grenades, so they started throwing potatoes back. And it gave enough time for the British ship to move away from the submarine. So because they were throwing potatoes, they didn't die, right? Okay. But then somehow they got into context of Lenin during the revolution, how they killed the entire Romanov family, blah, blah, blah.
Isn't that disputed now, though?
I don't know.
I think
even if it's not, I understand that the contextual reason why they did it. Because if there's any of them left, they have a reason,
a claim to the throne.
That's
the whole Anastasia, like the whole Princess Anastasia faking that woman who claimed to be the princess, even though I think that has since been debunked, just so she could hold on to that claim. I think that was like a CIA puppet. Well, this was before the CIA, but that was like a Western puppet. Just found somebody, claimed that was a relative of the Romanovs, just so they could reinstate the Tsarist regime.
Yeah, so that was the point of the nowadays, we can't do that nowadays. This is 120 years ago. Things are different. 120 years ago, Russia literally had a fucking king. It was a feudalist society, So you have to take these things with context, right? And so, but they're like, oh, Lenin, a totalitarian, warmongering, leader, takes down, occupies Russia and reinforces their eminent domain on the entire the surrounding landscape. I'm like, dude,
calm down, man. Yeah.
I'm like, what? Like, we were just talking about random fucking facts, and you just had to throw that in. I'm like, okay. It was like, are you gonna like talk about like the Civil War, or are you gonna talk about like anything the Americans have done and say it with the same tone?
No,
and I know. And so again, context. Yes, Stalin did some fucked up shit, but he also like.
I would also argue that most of what he did that caused like mass murders. I mean, sure, there was like the independent and internal purges of like military personnel stuff, and like that. I'm not excusing any of that, but like kind of like the larger starvation stuff, and this is true of Mao too. Mm-hmm. That isn't done like that wasn't none of that was intentional. That was also done in the like that. The point of those cooperative farms was to feed people that weren't getting fed. So like it was all done altruistically, and it was done out of the goodness of the heart.
They didn't want to.
Yeah, and then the Cossacks burned a lot of fields.
But then
and stuff.
There's a whole like the Holodomor. I'm like
the Holodomor's bull. That's not a real thing. That's a fake thing. Yeah.
I know, but like the people are forgetting context.
Yeah, it's all context,
right?
And so
and they're like, because if they look into the history of it, the reason why that happened, and by the way, it was happening in Kazakhstan and other parts in Russia. It was happening. The plagues were happening. But the droughts were happening in Russia. Yep. And so it wasn't just Ukraine. Ukraine just happened to be the wheat field of Europe, right? Of Eastern Europe in general.
Yeah, I mean that's to this day that's still.
It was because one scientist had to bunk science, and somehow because of bureaucracy, he got basically a shitty degree and everybody contested him. He got into government somehow. and he became like the leading scientist for the agricultural
Right.
department. And he had this whole idea is like, if we just toughen the seeds with winter, they'll be harder seeds. I'm like, which is scientific bunk now. But they did that, and that fucked up
Fuck the
everything.
crops, yeah.
And ever since then, they're like, okay, no more of this. And so surprisingly, no more huge droughts, no more mass starvation. But it wasn't on purpose. But the CIA in the West will flip that. They will flip that, and they'll make it to be like,
Yeah.
oh, look, this Stalin killed millions of people, starved 40 million people.
And Parenti like
You're such a-
debunks that in this book of like to kind of bring it back to the book.
Yeah.
He talks about like that would be an impressive feat of like if you did the math of like Russia's population at the time, like that means that Russia's population would be growing at like alarming rates. And he even goes into like we have the records after the Soviet Union fell, we have the Gulag records, and it's like I actually meant to look this up and I forgot. Damn.
Majority of gulags closed in 53.
Yeah,
54.
like the gulags weren't a
95%
thing.
of
These
them.
like work camps. I mean, they were a thing, but I mean, like it wasn't just some like mass deportation to gulags and just mass
Yeah.
murders and stuff. It's like that's all been overblown, propagandized, and made up. And like, yeah, the gulags were like essentially just
Yeah.
prisons. I think it was like for whatever the period was,
but
like a massive percentage of them
but
were released.
The way they were intricately like explained here in the U.S. It was like their death camps.
Yeah, they're
Right?
not death camps.
They were sent to Siberia and they starved to death within 3 weeks. He's like, no, majority of these people were either nationalists.
Yeah, or
they were
like a lot of them were criminals. It was like
criminals.
murders and
Yeah.
thieves, and
They
like,
were
you know.
sent to these gulags, to these camps, to these labor camps, and they can work off their sentence.
Yeah, which I think like most of them did. There was I forget the statistic, and I should have like highlighted in the book, but like he quotes the statistics that we have from the records of like most of these people just worked their sentence and then went home.
Yeah.
Like it's not like it was like
5
some
years, 10 years.
yeah, it wasn't some death camp, which I would argue is much more humane than like the American prison system, where like we have what 20% of what's the stat 20% of the world's prisons
population,
yeah, it
about
was
5% of the
yeah.
population.
yeah
Yeah, and so it's the same. But here's the thing: it's the same thing happening here. I think from what I can remember from his statistics, the amount of people that were in the gulags
I can pull it up.
back then, when there was 200 million Soviets, and right now 5 million people in what was it? How many people are right now in U.S.?
340 million.
No, I know 340 million, but how many people in the U.S. prisons? U.S.
2.5 million.
U.S. prisons population.
No, that's way too low. Oh,
U.S. prison population 1.2 million, 1.23 million.
okay.
Right? So it's the Soviets had like 30% more of people in prison. And this is under Stalin, the dictator, right? And well, we have fucking, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden right now. So imagine just like a whole different contextual scenario where just like this is post World War II. They're trying to reconstruct the entire economy, and there's a lot of opposing factions. They just had a civil war. They just had World War One. They had World War II, and yes, Stalin was he was a very strong leader, but sometimes he fucked up too. But after 53, when he died, they closed the majority of camps, and they think like, the Soviet Union is a totalitarian dictatorship. Except every 5-6 years, they had a new fucking president.
Yeah.
So kind of well, if that's a totalitarian dictatorship, we have Obama here for 8 years. We had Bush for 8 years, longer than the Soviet presidents were.
Yeah, we had the Bush dynasty.
Yeah, the
right?
Bush dynasty, multiple
Bushes.
Can you imagine the Stalin's son coming in?
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Like,
I wasn't that guy a fucking idiot, but
yeah.
that's a separate.
Hey, so was
conversation, I guess.
fucking George Bush.
That's fair, yeah.
Junior.
Yeah, he says like the sorry, I just had the stat here. It was like I don't know. I mean, I lost it. It doesn't matter. The point is that it was about the gulags and just like how they made it was they worked 8-hour days, 6 days a week for
That's right. Yep.
yeah, $40 a month, which I think is more than what American prisoners today make.
Yeah.
So like,
And that was 60 years ago.
that was 70.
This is comparative. This is in the
No,
90s.
I don't. Oh, this is in the 90s. This is in
in the-
89. Yeah.
Yeah, this is 98.
Yeah.
This is 98. So
98. No.
yeah, because this book was written 98, so he
it
probably
actually doesn't say if it's adjusted for inflation or not. So it's 250 rubles, which is about $40 a month. I don't know if that's. Yeah, this book was written, but I mean, I don't know if that's adjusted
Okay,
for
so-
inflation at that time or not.
But regardless, even if it was adjusted for inflation in the 90s,
It doesn't matter. It's still more than American
it
prisoners
it
make.
would be
Yeah.
way more than American prisoners make right now, and that
It's
somehow
like $2 a day or whatever.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
That
he
is
also
a-
cites like once like the wall came down and like the Western countries kind of flooded in, they were like trying to prosecute all of these like mass murderers, like this Nuremberg style, like trying to find these people,
Yeah.
and they couldn't find anybody. I think they had like what Poland did is they sentenced they tried 12 incredibly elderly policemen
For,
that
like,
were
brutality.
around in Stalin's day because they were like guards at a prison or something, and like they mistreated some prisoners over 50 years ago, and that's the only people they could find to round up to try in these like public trials, because like there was no like mass murder or mistreatment. This wasn't a
'cause
Nazi
if you think
regime
about it,
of
if you
doing
think
the
about
Holocaust.
it, yeah.
It was just bureaucracy. Like,
And if you
I don't
think
know.
about it,
Frustrating.
like, if you think about it, if there were more of these things, but there wasn't, because it's 90% of it's
Yeah.
made up,
most of it's
and
made
10%
up,
of it is true. But even that truth comes with a certain context, right? And this is what Parenti talks about. He goes back all the way from feudalistic days to modern day society, and he talks about what happened after the USSR fell. He talks about how majority of the Russians wanted to go back because they realized that they were so privileged to
Yeah.
even realize that, like, hey, I didn't know. I thought when you were just sick, you went to the doctor. You didn't have to pay for it.
Yeah.
They didn't realize that this was the capitalist system. And I think that when it comes to that, that is one thing that they could have fixed.
Yeah, there's a section in here called "We Didn't Realize What We Had," and it's like it's quotes from these people that like they just like the grass is always greener type thing, and they just didn't really realize that like they took it for granted, and like once you're in capitalism, and this is the anecdote, and this is like what you hear all the time from North Korean defectors, is every time a North Korean crosses into South Korea, they want to go back because it's like, oh, capitalism sucks. Like, yeah, it may not be great in North Korea, but like I think the vast majority of North Korean defectors like long to go back to North Korea once they get a taste of capitalism. And it's like, yeah, the grass is always greener, and you think like, because also this is due to capitalist propaganda of like this like
Exactly.
beautiful the American dream, and everyone's going to have 2-car garages and a beautiful house, whatever, and then you get here and it's just like, oh, you have to grind 3 jobs just so you don't starve to death.
Yeah.
Where it's like in a communist country, you may not have a great job and the food might not be all that great, but you have your basic living necessities taken care of. You don't work all that hard. You certainly don't work as hard as you would in America. Like
No,
the
not even
average,
close.
not even close.
No,
Like
you
what
would
is
just go
it
to
like?
work, fuck around, and you come home and you live your
and
life.
like you don't have all the same luxury goods, and I think people get like mesmerized by the idea of
Yeah.
like having a car and having a stereo and all this stuff. But like,
the thing is, that's
yeah.
why I think that's one good thing that Tito did, right? That Yugoslavia did. It's just like they didn't cut themselves off from the rest of the world.
China's a
They-
good example of this
They
too.
wasn't.
Yeah.
They weren't very isolationist,
Yeah.
right? If say it's 70s Yugoslavia, it still is communist, like, right? It's the way they structured things was a little different than the USSR. They had more opportunity as like a small, almost like a dengism, right? Where like you can have like a small shop that is owned by people and it's not owned by the government. But like I was talking to my dad, my dad's like 90% of jobs were owned by the government. The 10% of jobs that were not owned by government was a grocery, small ass grocery on the side.
Yeah.
like AM, PM, stuff like that. People like can like run with
Yeah,
their
for
family.
sure.
If you have anything more than like 6 employees, it's a government job. It turns into a government job, right?
Like a state-owned, yeah.
But what was great about Yugoslavia, for example, was if you were in, I don't know, Romania, you couldn't get Levi's jeans, right? Everybody was like, oh, they want to leave. And Yugoslavia, if you really wanted Levi's jeans, you just get in a train, go to Venice, Italy, hop off, buy Levi's jeans, and take a train back. You had the opportunity to get these goods, right? But at home, be like, hey, we got Yugoslavian jeans for 1/5 the price. And then people will come back and like, oh, Levi's jeans, really cool. But then they're like, well, this is pretty much the fucking same thing. They realize that after a while, it's pretty much the same thing. And then that gave people in Yugoslavia a chance to like compete with their types of goods, Italian goods.
I think that's something that happens as you age, right? Like kids, younger kids, not to generalize, to overly generalize, but I think like kids want like the new trendy thing. They want to spend the money on the jeans or whatever. But I think as you get older, you kind of don't care about that shit.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Parenti also recognizes is like that idea for like the revolution and like this idea of like revolutionary communism and that comradeship or whatever. He's like, that's for the older generations, and the kids want the Levi's and the stereos and stuff. And so it's like, that's kind of, it was once the generation, once it was 1 or 2 generation removed from the revolution, people kind of forgot why there was a revolution because they don't remember the czarist oppression. Like they don't have that in the
Yeah,
memory.
that was grandpa.
Kids
Like,
kids growing
I don't
up
give a
post
fuck.
Stalin were like 80 or in
Grandpa,
the
do we
80s.
have to learn Marxism?
Yeah, if you're in the early 80s in East Berlin and you want to listen to punk and you want to just visit West Berlin or whatever, it's like, oh, I can see how like you have no connection to like the revolution. And that's what Parenti talks about is like once you lost that connection to the revolution, it's really hard to like keep that revolutionary spirit. And you don't know what you don't have, so you want it, but you're also like it's a double-edged sword because once you lose what you do have, you're gonna miss it. And I just pulled up some stats. In 2012, 100 defectors returned to North Korea via China. 700 defectors returned in 2015. It's like a thing. People who defect from North Korea, like the majority of them want to go back. I think. Like it looks like.
What do you think about those claims that like if somebody defects from North Korea, they'll like imprison your entire family?
I don't believe that at all. Like I think that we should do an episode or at least have like some more on North Korea because I don't want to get too in the weeds about North Korea.
If you are North Korean and you would love to, I would love to have you on. That I don't know that much about North Korea besides propaganda.
There's an Instagram account I follow, which I think he's Indonesian, I want to say, or he's Southeast Asian. I don't know exactly what, but he lives in North Korea. He moved to Pyongyang, and he just like posts from his Instagram account of like him on the subway, him at like street vendors or whatever, and it's just like a normal country. And I love his Instagram account. I'll link his Instagram account below.
Dude, let's see if
I'll message him. I don't know what language he speaks. I don't know his deal at all, but I'll message him. But I followed his Instagram account for years because he's just been living in Pyongyang, or he lived in Pyongyang. I don't know if he still lives there, but he's just like. And it debunked so much for me of like it's like he's just like there's just people going to work on the streets. There's like street vendors, and it's just a normal country, and it's just a normal fucking country. And that's like I hate all this like would they have imprisoned their whole family? It's like probably not, dude, because it's just a big ass country, and they're just dealing with the same bureaucracy, and it's just a normal country. And yeah, it's a pretty like locked down, limited state-owned country, but it's still just a normal country with normal people.
See, what Kim Jong-un needs to do is he needs to work on his fucking marketing.
Yeah, he works on
socialists
image. Yeah.
suck. He needs to hire Trotskyists.
I honestly like that he's just like, no, I'm doing me. Like, we're a Marxist country. We're just living our life.
I just want, it's like, if he wants to win this war in the long run, he needs for people from the outside,
the hearts and minds era.
Inside. Yeah. Nobody's gonna believe the U.S. and the West.
Yeah.
If they are provided contextual evidence of literal videos and stuff.
And I don't know this Instagram guy. I don't know his like he posts a lot about Palestine now. But yeah, back in the day he like lived in Pyongyang, and I just love that it was like
we should hit him up if he speaks English. We're in good hands. That would be great. Because we could talk about like North Korea. I think that would be a great episode.
I mean, all of his stuff.
Oh my god, I don't know anybody that's had a North Korean like from a leftist account that's had a North Korean.
He has a YouTube too where he just posts like daily life, like vlogs from North Korea, and like his name is Jacka Parker.
Dude, email this guy right now.
Yeah, I'll reach out to him. I don't know how many followers he has. Like I don't know how famous he is.
Yeah, go on our account and follow him.
Yeah, well, I mean, he has 55,000 followers, so it's not crazy. Yeah, I'll follow him.
Even if he had 100 followers, like I would like to see his perspective.
Yeah,
because he's living in a country that none of us have had access to, or really don't know much about.
Yeah, it would just be interesting to have a conversation with him and be like, what's it actually like? And I think like, so from what I understand from him, it's like, it's just a normal country with normal people, and like I think it's just such shrouded in mystery, and I think that mystery, like. Because there's that hole, people want to fill it with boogeyman stories, and it's just like once you strip away
because of that hole, the CIA can fill it.
Yeah, and propaganda can fill in. But I think like I see your point. Like if Kim was just like open the country and be like, no, we're just a normal country. We're just doing our things. We've perfected Marxism.
Documentaries.
Yeah,
just some guy walking around. Oh, you think this is all fake?
Yeah.
Here's a camera for a tourist. Film for
go nuts. And this guy did that, I think, and so that's why I think that's really valuable.
I think they would win in the long run. I think a lot of
I said, I think there's also
a lot more support.
Yeah, I think so too. But I also I almost respect that he's just like, I don't care what you think about our country. We're like just living our life, and we're just like, our people go to work and they come home, and like we don't need your approval. I don't need Westerners' approval. I'm doing me, and I kind of like, I almost respect that. I don't know. I don't want to get too.
That's not about the approval of Westerners. It's the it's a criticism that can happen from the American people to the American government.
Yeah.
Right. if they want to make a better deal, an arms deal, a ceasefire, some sort of peace to last in Korea, the only way that's going to happen is from people in the U.S. pushing the American politicians. There's nothing else. Even that doesn't work most times. But if anything does work, it's going to be the people pushing for that, right? Because it's never going to happen otherwise.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to that.
Also, I think it'd be great if they would get American American kids and students to go to North Korea to learn in universities.
Yeah, this guy lived in North Korea from 2013 to 2018. So he lived in
Wow,
North
for
Korea for
5
5 years. He
years.
lived in Pyongyang, I think, for 5 years.
Should have stayed longer because I don't think COVID hit North Korea like it anymore.
Yeah, I would be curious because I think like there's all those reports about China like really like handling COVID. I would be curious to see how it affected North Korea, if at all, right? I mean, like
yeah,
there's
they
such
probably
little
shut everything
traffic.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they probably were really, really like safe when like
Yeah.
doing trading with China and stuff. Like
Yeah.
that.
Well, I don't know. We didn't really talk too much about Parenti, but we're at an hour and a half or something.
Well,
Do
you
wanna,
talked
like-
about his books and the
Yeah.
concept in the books. I
Yeah,
think.
I would just say it's definitely worth a read. Parenti may have some questionable opinions on Yugoslavian history and some kind of questionable ties to Yugoslavian people or to Serbian dictators or to Serbian genocidists. But that, ignoring all that, the book I think offers just such a succinct and such a clear definition of both fascism. We didn't even talk about the fascism aspect because the whole book is about like this creeping fascism and how cozy liberals are to fascism and how fascism like really kind of insidiously integrates itself into like the fabric of like democracy and quote unquote like liberal democracy, and how communism is the only real bulwark to that, the only thing that can stop it, and it's fascism's job is primarily kind of rooting out and killing communism, which is its a mortal enemy. That's why like I just think it's really helpful.
The reason why I didn't get too much of that because like I already knew all of that.
Yeah, none of this was a surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think
I
like
didn't
I
need
was
that.
reading it from the perspective of like what would somebody who doesn't know a lot about communism, what would they get from this?
And I was reading it from my perspective.
Yeah.
Like I know plenty about communism.
Yeah.
I want to know what
more.
the fuck happened.
If you're like an expert, I don't think this book's for you because I think it offers a very like
you already know what it's saying.
Yeah, if you've read like if you've read State and Revolution or like any Mao or any Stalin, you don't need this book. I think there's some value in reading it because it just kind of like but it'll only reinforce what you already know. But if you're kind of new to like leftism and stuff, and maybe like reading Marx is a little hard because it's a very
this is a very
it's 200
easy
years
book to
old.
read.
You know, Marx is those are old books. Even Lenin's 100 plus years old now for a lot of those books. This is a very easy read. It's very accessible. It's written in the first person. It's kind of playful at times. It's like, you know, there's some kind of jokes and anecdotes, and I think it is very accessible. And like I said, it is also free on audiobook with a pretty good narrator. One other point I had is that he not only kind of goes after like anti-communist and fascist, but he also kind of squarely debunks the naivete of anarchists, and he talks about like how anarchists are democratic socialists, and just like
he includes Chomsky in
he includes Chomsky in this, and he kind of he clearly like illustrates like how anarchism would just crumble under a fascist like threat. Like there is no,
because he was talking about like the anarcho-syndicalists.
Yeah, he was talking about anarcho-syndicalists, and like there's no state organization to like, you have no military, you have no state response.
They would just come in and
they would just steamroll you, and that's like and he illustrates that very well of like he illustrates so well about how anarchism is kind of like a naive ideology, and like it's
no offense to our
anarchist listeners, but like
we respect you for your leftism.
Read some Lenin, I guess, but I don't know. Or read this book, and it'll be very clear. Like in a real world scenario, if you the dream, like you've what's his name, Kropotkin or whatever, the conquest of bread. Say you've made it, you've enacted your anarcho-syndicalist like utopia.
Well, that's what communism is.
I guess technically, but like, what then if you have no central state power? If you have no centralized state, you have no kind of like organization or hierarchical like military. What then if there is a fascist counter-revolutionary element in your ranks? How do you then respond to that? And Parenti's argument is that you couldn't without some kind of centralized response. Or
aliens.
What
if the aliens come?
I don't know what that has to do with anything, but sure, aliens.
What? No, the point is like, if everybody is living in perfect harmony,
sure,
right? Everything is subdued. Fascism is subdued. Everything is perfect. What about aliens? You know, what if they invaded you and have a central force to fight back the aliens?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, that makes more sense. I was like, what?
Obviously, that's not going to happen.
But it's a good thought experiment. Is like, yeah, you have some kind of counter-revolutionary fascism or aliens or whatever.
Well, if
you
this
have,
is in the distant universe.
the Huns are at your gate. How do you I think it's like the dishwasher or something. Sorry. If the Huns are at your gate, which may be kind of racist, like Orientalist ideology these days, I'm not actually sure. But if the barbarians are at your gates, how do you defend? The hordes are at your gate. How do you defend against that? How do you, as an anarcho-syndicalist, like trade guild, commune society, how would you defend yourself?
Call the next town. Tell them to send their 10 best soldiers.
Yeah, and you can't. And so, Parenti makes that argument of like, just how liberalism and social democracy is like not good enough to stop fascism. So too isn't anarchism or other forms of leftism.
We see where your heart is, but we're speaking in realistic terms from human nature and a point of structure and organization.
We got to get better at reviewing books, but we'll work on this because we were all over the place. But I was here for it, I guess.
I think I like this way of reviewing books because we're taking the basic concepts that he has in the book
and then just
exploring
it. Yeah. So I don't know. I give it a thumbs up. I give it 2 thumbs up. If you're especially, I would say if you're new to communism, this will be incredibly valuable. This will be able to win your arguments at your next Thanksgiving dinner with your right-wing uncle. Like this is 100%. This is all of the arguments and kind of anecdotes and like very, very plainly, very succinctly, very clearly explained ways to like describe, define why communism works, why fascism works, or why fascism is on the rise. It's just, this is the book for you.
And also if you're our lefty friends and you're not a communist and you just want to understand what actual communism is.
If you're an anarchist,
this is a really good read too.
Yeah, this is a good because this is from the perspective of like a Stalinist or a Tanky. Like Michael Parenti is like kind of an unapologetic Marxist-Leninist like Soviet supporter, and so but he's also incredibly smart and like,
and he also criticizes
but also it is just one man's opinion, and he is not infallible. He makes mistakes.
He's not God.
He's not God, and he can get some stuff wrong, and you got to understand that too. This is just one man's perspective. However,
I really like his perspective.
I do too.
And then you got to have like the balance, and then you learn about his other perspectives on other leaders, and you're like, oh well, God damn it.
I'm glad it's a good addition to the bookshelf. So there you go.
Yeah. Michael Parenti, everybody.
Going on my lefty bookshelf. Just another one to add to the collection. Well, I think that's going to be it for us for episode 45. We appreciate you sticking with us. It's a long episode. Yeah, we're at an hour 20.
Especially for the audio. We're at like
the
1 hour and a half.
audio is like an hour 40 or an hour 35 or something. But let's do our outro and get out of here. If you're watching this on YouTube, we really appreciate it. Make sure you're giving us a subscription, subscribe, comment, hit the bell icon if you want to be notified when we go when new videos are published. And we publish about 3 to 4 to 5 a week, depending. We publish a full episode, and then we'll take clips from that are like different segments.
If people are still confused about what the hell's going on when you see us on their feed, we have our main episode that we post, and then we'll take clips.
The segmented stories,
sometimes 2, 3, sometimes 5, and we'll take those clips and we'll post them individually if you don't want to watch a full episode.
Yeah, you just watch them, and then they're anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes.
You're missing all the great parts in the beginning and the end. Yeah. It's just straight news, right? Yeah. But with the actual podcast, you see us fucking around.
And if you are listening to us on just your audio version on your Apple Podcasts, on your Spotify, there is a YouTube channel, so we appreciate you subscribing on the Apple or on your podcast app of choice. So thanks there. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review and a little review there. We appreciate all of the help there. That's what really pushes out. If likes and subscribes on YouTube videos is what pushes it, it's 5-star reviews and ratings on the
give us
Apple
any
Podcasts.
review that you think.
Give us whatever you find fair. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok on Revolutionary Rhetoric Podcast, Rev Rhetoric Pod, Revolutionary Rhetoric. Just search us, you'll find us. Join our Discord. The link will be in the description below.
It's free now.
It's free. The Discord, just come hang out. We got a few people in there chatting. It's small, but we're working on building it. And last but not least, our Patreon. We do have a Patreon, Revolutionary Rhetoric. All of that money goes back into kind of what you see here, the sets, the lights, cameras, but also half of all of the money we receive, we donate to the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund. The Palestinian Children's Relief Fund, giving some of those the kids and folks in Gaza and the greater Palestinian area some support, some food, some clothes, the medical supplies they need, and so forth. If you don't want to donate to us, if you don't want to be our patron, you just want to give straight to the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund, the link to that charity will be in the description as well. Feel free to give straight to them. Don't feel obligated to give to us. If you do want to throw us a buck, we'll take it. But if you want to just give straight to them, please do that as well. I don't think I forgot anything.
I have two more things. We
has
are
two more
part of the
things.
Anti-Capitalist Podcast Network.
Yeah.
That'll also be in a link below if you want to check
There's a
them
ton
out.
of great podcasts on that network. It's a ton of other guys. You got different perspectives, some really smart people on their different podcast feeds. Go check out the Anti-Capitalist Podcast Network. It's a great group of voices from the left that are kind of all that you need to hear.
Yeah. And one last thing, if you haven't already, go ahead and I'll probably put his link as well to it. From Left of the Projector, our episode with Evan just came out.
Yeah, we were on Left of the Projector.
It was a fun time.
We were on the one of the most recent episodes of Left of the Projector podcast with Evan. It's a film and television, or mostly film podcast that kind of reviews and takes a look at movies from a leftist perspective, from a Marxist perspective. We were lucky enough to guest on that podcast to discuss my favorite film, True Romance, 1993. Quentin Tarantino wrote. Ridley Scott directed, Christian Slater, Patricia Arquette starred in. True Romance. Go listen to that. We had a really great time talking to Evan, talking about movies and kind of we got to kind of nerd out and just talk about film culture and films. It was really cool.
It was a fun time. It
was really good. We're hoping to be back in October. I think we're going to do a Halloween thing with them. I think so. That's the plan. Yeah.
Scary one.
Spooky.
Marxist perspective on.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm not gonna spoil it, but I'm excited for the movie we're watching there.
We're watching. We already found out which one.
Oh, I know what we're watching. Yeah.
Oh,
I think we just established. We'll talk off air, but yeah.
Sounds good.
I think I know.
All right, guys. That'll be it from us.
Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you next week. Maybe we'll find something to stream, maybe not. But otherwise, we love you all very much, and we'll see you later.
Bye.
That was a fancy spin move.